not into podcasts.
I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again. What a hit!
Back of the net.
Hello, you are listening to the Not a Pundit podcast, and I am Killian Ginnity, and I'm delighted to be joined by our own Conor Glennon and Nathan Byrne. How are we doing, lads?
All good, man. Can't complain. Newcastle yesterday with an interesting end to the game, but look, 1-1 in Paris is one of the best games I've seen in a long time. I do think we were completely robbed at the end, but that said, like I said to you boys yesterday, they could have scored 6, so all in all, we did okay. What about you, Nate? How you going?
Your typical depressed United fan coming off a 3-0 with Galatasaray, 3 goalkeeper errors, which is just lovely, you know. Looking like we're out of Champions League, so yeah, they can't get much better, kind of.
And it can't get much worse. But all jokes aside, we are covering a more serious than usual topic than we normally do. This is a follow-up to our previous chat on drugs and drug usage in sport that Conor Glennon himself brought us through, and I'm hoping to try and live up with. So, lads, we're going to be looking at betting, which has obviously been very much a hot topic over the last number of years, really. So, Conor, what's your kind of general knowledge of gambling and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, look, from a personal point of view, I think most young lads in Ireland, you grow up and you're probably putting a fiver on a game here and there and doing an accumulator that's 20 teams too long to try even be successful. But and with some, I mean, it brings some fun to games, but obviously it's a very serious issue for some as well. From a professional side of things, obviously in the game, you know, we've seen a lot throughout both the Premier League and across the world that gambling is unfortunately something that is part and parcel of professional athletes' lives, whether it's through it starts out through boredom or addiction. But yeah, you know, you hear the stories of your Gazas, your Paul Mersons, and kind of up to even the last season or so, we've seen more names. But it's no, I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Specifically on it's sort of part of culture now, specifically in England and Ireland. It's like betting's become really embedded into sports culture, and it's something that, you know, as you said, like there's even probably little kids getting involved in England and Ireland in it. That's probably where the route starts for some young kids. But yeah, I definitely think it's something that's slowly and surely became more prevalent, and it's something that, you know, rightly so, has been looked at in sports and across the world. So yeah, no, it should be interesting to see what way we go with this chat and see where we end up with our conclusions.
Well, starting kind of at the end, I think the conclusion that we will take from this is that betting is a double-edged sword. That it is a lifeline and maybe even the lifeblood of the sport. That it adds an extra layer of excitement for fans. That, like, placing a bet can turn even the most mundane match into like something thrilling and something that you have a real investment in. However, the dark side kind of reveals the potential for match fixing, for corruption, and where we're going to really be discussing today, addiction. And as Conor touched on there's a long list of footballers who've spoken out of their struggles with gambling, including Michael Owen, Wayne Rooney, Paul Merson, Michael Chopra.
That was a big one. That was the one that really came to mind when we were touching on this episode. He's a very interesting figure in this topic.
Yeah, I think like he is almost broke. That like I think he played later than he would have, just to try and...
Yes, he was taking signing on fees to try pay off gambling debts, and you know, when you're at that point, you know,
I think that was the reason why he signed for Sunderland.
I genuinely think it was. Man. Yeah, I think it was.
Other names include Peter Shilton, Andros, Townsend, and Hamann. However, the most high-profile recent example of this is Brentford and England striker Ivan Toney, who was banned by the FA for 8 months in May after placing hundreds of bets, including ones on his own team. Toney has since spoken out of his addiction, and will now try and rebuild a career that appeared to be on the verge of hitting the next level and becoming a reliable Premier League and England striker. Another case of note is Newcastle's Sandro Tonali, who was served with a 10-month ban from football for his involvement in illegal betting in October 2023. The 23-year-old was found to have gambled on matches, including his former club AC Milan. And with his ban, he must also attend treatment sessions for problem gamblers and give a series of talks about his experience over the period as part of his plea bargain deal to reduce the length of it. So, Connor, obviously this is affecting your own Newcastle United. How did you feel when the news broke?
Well, first of all, I think, as a human being, you feel sorry for him. It's obviously he's done what he did, but at the end of the day, it's his livelihood, and also it's an addiction that he's with. I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't. If my complete first thought was AC Milan have pulled their pants down here and had to have known about this. It's one of those ones that you guys know, especially Nate. You're practically the United insider. That there's no way clubs don't know about these things, and I think they try to get him off their books. But look, it's a huge loss for us. I'm glad he's at least able to train with the team. I think that's one thing that we can touch on in the Toney case, where look, I think they made Sandro made a mistake, but I think if you completely put him on ice and just go, no, you can't even train with the team. You can't train at any English facility. That doesn't help. In moments like that, he needs people around him. So he can play in friendlies and he can train with the boys. And I think, look, that alongside with the treatment he's hopefully getting, and not just doing to get a plea deal, hopefully he wants to change and turn the corner on that. But time will tell.
And Nathan, Toney was obviously probably the most high profile because of I don't know if it was just press at the time, but I definitely remember being linked with the likes of United and maybe even a Chelsea that without Kane being there, he was England's nailed on starting striker.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the big thing, specifically when he went on the Stephen Bartlett podcast, I believe, to talk about it, and then one of the things I got from it was I felt quite sorry on one hand because it's someone's career, and you can separate the both. You can go gambling's an addiction, and it's a mental thing. People need support through it and all that. And then you've got his career on the other hand, and it's like, yeah, I agree that these players need to be punished for breaking the rules, but I don't know specifically if impacting their careers on the pitch is the right thing. I think
100%.
education, I think helping them with therapy and all that and going through that stuff, I think that's the way forward in my opinion. It's like I don't see what you achieve by banning them. I really don't. I think re-educating and put more light on the situation is the direction that the governing bodies need to go.
And on that, I think one of the most important things to educate people on is the rules and what are there. So any form of betting on football is banned worldwide by the FA, the English FA, for all players, managers, coaches, club staff, directors, and licensed agents, including involved in all levels of the English game. This includes the Premier League, the EFL, the National League, the Women's Super League, and the Women's Championship. The punishments increase depending on the closeness of the player to the match in question. So hence why Ivan Toney got a relatively high ban, was because there was games involving his team. And obviously that opens up for potential match fixing depending on the bet, which I believe in Toney's case, it was a lot more about him scoring was the thing he was betting on rather than anything that he actually had direct control of.
Which is an interesting anecdote. It's not like he's betting on them to lose, but it's still dodgy.
Yeah, absolutely. So the English FA introduced strict new rules on betting before the 2014-15 season. On the face of it, the rules are simple, and to paraphrase it, anyone involved in the game must not bet on any football match anywhere in the world. Simple, very clean and clear. The ban covers every match in every tournament around the world. The only exception is for participants at step 5 or below in the National League system, or for referees and match officials operating below level 4 who are not subject to the worldwide ban. Basically, nobody really cares about the small game, so it's not as high stakes. But saying that, I believe in the last 10 years, it could have been the Wales top league was actually one of the most bet on leagues in the world because
Really?
yeah, I remember reading in a paper, so I will double check this after. But Wales and somewhere in could have been Hong Kong or Chinese Taipei or somewhere like that. That they had some of the highest levels because of the timing and it's suited for accumulators and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Furthermore, the rules prohibit insider trading as per the Kieran Trippier case to prevent bets being placed from information that was being passed on. So Kieran Trippier was served a 10-week ban and a £70,000 fine for telling his friend about his impending transfer to Atletico Madrid in 2019. Now, in that case, he tried to claim that he had no knowledge of the bet, and under the rules, that doesn't matter. You gave insider trading. The Newcastle star would have still been in breach, even if he was unaware his information was going to be used in the bet.
See, that's dodgy to me. Like, you're allowed to have friends. You know what I mean. Like, you're obviously going to tell your boys or your wife or whatever. Oh, we're going to Atletico, and so your wife tells her friend, who tells her husband, and it goes from there. It's kind of like they're the kind of ones that gets a bit more murky for me because it's like they're not robots.
Well, it kind of goes back more to investment. So let's think of this as a business and a stock. Kieran Trippier going to Atletico Madrid is going to raise the value of that brand in England. So if you were to look at it from a business perspective, me telling you that I'm going to move to a different company because the company that I'm working for currently isn't good and they're going to get tanked, well then you're in a position to control something unduly.
Yeah.
And unduly earned. So that's kind of the logic. One of the interesting things, though, is players in England can gamble on any non-football related betting markets. So there is still the opportunity for players to, for want of a better word, get their fix.
True, yeah. I think a big thing is also, though, football is what they know. You know what I mean? I feel like if someone's going down the gambling rabbit hole and they are addicted to it in whatever way, they are going to go the football route. So I think that in itself is a double-edged sword. So yeah, the big overwhelming thing for me is like there needs to be more education in football about betting, especially when big partners in the league, like all the leagues and the federations are taking betting money. You know what I mean? It's in their interest to educate these people, and it's a necessary step in my opinion. And it's a step that needs to happen. Like I think we saw in Tony's case and what he said after, it's like he didn't get the necessary education or the necessary help over that period. So yeah, that's something that's really important.
And you've touched on my exact next point. What about clubs that are owned by people or companies connected to betting? So when the FA brought in these rules in the 2014-15 season, they feared that there could be an adverse impact on up-and-coming clubs such as Brentford and Brighton, who owed their ascendancy to the pinnacle of the sport to their betting entrepreneur bosses. So the worry being is that if they enforced a strict separation between football and gambling, would these teams fade away into obscurity again? So an exemption was drawn up for participants in football, which was aimed at club owners, but kind of leaves enough space for interpretation. The FA said the policy is not secret and that anyone who needs to know what it says has a copy. However, in the past, it has refused to disclose the details of it, leaving fans in the dark about the small print. Those bound by the policy must submit an annual declaration to ensure they are meeting all of the required conditions. They're also obliged to report any suspicious betting activity on English football that they learn of by virtue of their position with the betting company to the FA. In April, the Premier League announced it would ban betting company logos from the front of the club's shirts. The rule would not come into effect until the 2026-2027 season, though even when it does, such firms advertising via sleeve sponsorship and pitch side hoardings will still be allowed. So
See, that's where I think it's a bit like you either do it or you don't. It's like, oh, great, you've taken the big logo off, but you can keep your little small ones or keep the even bigger ones on the billboards. It's like, it seems like it's a bit of tokenism, to be honest.
with a glaring hole being left for those profiting from gambling to be able to invest and practically run amok.
Pretty much, the thing that I think we need to also consider is, when you think gambling, you think your Tenallies and the big top end of the game, your one percenters. While I won't say the player's name just for obvious reasons, but I crossed paths with a League of Ireland player. I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago, and he said for his club they were on an away fixture, and he was walking just out of the boys at the back of the bus. He was kind of up with the manager, chatting to him about something, and he saw a bit of paper on the ground. He was like, "Oh, I'll just pick that up, whatever." And it was a betting slip for them to lose. So someone on that bus had bet for his team to lose, and it's across all levels, and I think it goes back to what Nate's saying. Like, it's especially for players who are earning a couple £100 a week. They're gonna go to what they know, and like, yes, they maybe they'll have their fix, and they can bet on rugby, they can bet on cricket, but they don't know cricket, they don't know rugby, they know football, they've got the inside information on their own team. And let's face it, leagues are small, especially when it comes to this. Goes back to the higher leagues again, where it's international players. You're gonna know if you're playing for Arsenal who's injured on Spurs. You just will.
No, for sure. And I think one of the big things that needs to be taken into account is the leagues go out and do their own investigations into it, so they know what the betting patterns are. They know if you're betting against your own team. I think that really needs to come into account when you're handing out these bans. Is there's a difference between being malicious with it and just doing betting. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
it's like if you're doing as you say on the bus, betting against your own team, that's like that's the extreme. That's the part that needs to be totally wiped out. The part where needs re-educating and stuff and along them lines is the ones that are betting, as in Tony's case, on himself to score, stuff like that. Like, there's a big middle ground between them two.
Well, it's a self belief thing. Like, and I think if you're a professional athlete, leaving out a gambling problem, even if you think about, oh, I can make some money here, it's like, just do not do it. You will get caught. But I think you're right, Nate. I'm not suggesting players bet on themselves, but it's not like he's saying, oh, I'm going to kick it out in the first minute of the game. It's I'm
Yeah.
backing myself to score. That just benefits his team and benefits his career. It kind of shows, yeah, I can do it. It's the same way that, I think Amir Khan bet on, Floyd Mayweather does it as well. They put massive bets on themselves to win through third party people. I think Carl Froch got done for it as well. Like, it begs the question of, if they're allowed bet on other games, if they're not putting the game into disrepute, should it be okay? But then at the same time, it does beg the question, if they're saying they're going to score, that goal could win them a game, and it could be a goalkeeper on the other side of it getting paid off. So it's probably one to just avoid completely.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one thing is like betting against your own team. It's like you're too far gone at that point, in my opinion. Like that's the point where it's at the extreme, and it's at a detriment to the whole sport. Where I think in Tony's case and other cases, it's they're betting for the dopamine hit. Like when they go out and play week in, week out, it's like that's their normal day to day now. Like the betting adds that extra layer of the dopamine and stuff like that. So I think there's a huge difference. And if you catch them at the point where they are only betting at themselves, then there's a real possibility to rehabilitate these people.
Yeah, fair.
For fans, betting rules in the UK are some of the most lax in the world. It's not like the States where there's only a number of states that'll allow you to do it. Fans are able to bet on almost anything in football, from the outcome of a match to the number of corners in a particular game, with little regulation currently existing. A bookmaker will offer any market that they feel will yield a profit, although small outcomes in games like a specific player receiving a yellow card are not always offered because they're too obscure. Betting on the minutiae of sporting events in this way is known as spot betting. This type of betting can turn trivial incidents like winning a throw-in into actions worth thousands of pounds. And this is where players betting on themselves becomes an issue.
Yeah.
I know that if I can get the ball, no matter where I'm on the pitch, I can kick it out in the 9th minute and get a throw.
Or I can give away 4 corners and get, over 3 corners. Yeah, okay, I see where you're going.
Yeah, so this is where you can actually affect a lot very, very easily. And like you can make other players unknowing accessories. So
Good point.
Connor, if you're like, if I know I need to get 3 corners in the first half, you're a defender. I just kick it off your shins. There's nothing you can do. And now I've guaranteed a corner, and other people can kind of be looking at me going, Jesus, you're a really bad footballer. Well, actually, no, I'm after earning three weeks' wages by that one action. So like for the fans, yes, it can be fun and exhilarating to do these kind of bits, because it can be a joke between mates kind of going, oh, I bet that Onana is going to spill the ball 3 times in the second half because he has like butter fingers. That's probably going to happen regardless, but so it's a bit of fun for us. But who's to say I'm not Onana's mate that is able to go and do that and actually affect that? Or yeah, like in a lesser extent, players even do this to get an upper edge in fantasy football. There's a great Twitter account called Fantasy Football Tracker. It's basically somebody that gets insiders to tell them the names of coaches, physios, players, fantasy football teams, and then tracks who they're putting in and out, usually their own teammates.
Wow, okay.
So that they can have sometimes kind of going, yeah, listen, Harry Maguire is carrying a little bit of a knock. He's definitely not going to start this week, so I'll take him out. That's only fantasy football, but again, people gamble on that. So there's many, many ways that these can have a much bigger effect on people through the chains of knowing somebody. A link of a link can give you information.
And football, although it's a big global game, it's a small scene,
The world is a village.
Yeah.
Which obviously the biggest worry about gambling is not only match fixing or anything like that, but addiction, which is probably the scariest part of it all. Stephen Corker. I think so he famously was on loan at Liverpool as a centre back, but was played up front. He now represents Sierra Leone in international football. He kind of rebuilt his career in Scotland, having come through the ranks at Tottenham. But he's spoken out about his own journey as a recovering gambling addict with the likes of The Athletic and stuff. He went to rehab for the first time when he was 19.
Jesus, that's young.
And that was through the Sporting Chance Clinic, and he left after a week.
I had a friend go in at a similar age and with a similar story, because that's the thing with these rehabs. It's not like some 5150 scene in a movie in the States. Like, you can leave. You're not locked into it.
And I believe this was after he had been like up on a night out with one of his teammates, and it was like, yeah, I'll borrow $1,000 just to do some more bets. I'll send it the next morning. And his teammate went to bed. Corker that night stayed up and gambled to 25,000 his teammate had in his account. It was only then that he checked himself in.
Yeah, and that's, the numbers get bigger and bigger and bigger. You know what I mean? Like, that's just one story that he's told. You know what I mean? It's a bleak world when you get into that. Like, I mean, it's akin to drugs or drink or anything, any kind of disease of addiction like that. It's before you know it, you're at the bottom.
I'm going to kind of stick with Corker just for this section. But one story he says, I'm just going to read it out here. When I was around 22 at QPR, I lost £250,000 in one night. Casinos told Les Ferdinand, the club's director of football, I was gambling way out of my depth. Les said, I didn't want to call you before a match with Arsenal, but how the fuck did you play that game? When I was at Liverpool in the 2015-16 season, it was out of control. I would drink to forget my gambling woes, and when I was drunk, I would gamble and black out. It was a cycle. The levels I took myself to as a gambler were insane. It wasn't just a bad habit, it was life-threatening. Cocker says gambling was a form of escape. To the outer eye, we were living the dream, but internally, so many of us were living far from it. We are sitting in hotels all day with times in our hands, and players relieve themselves of the pressure by having a bet. I would train in the morning, come home around 2 p.m., eat, and go straight to the casino and stay there until the money ran out. People often look at players and just say they're cheats, but I see the correlation between sex addiction, alcoholism, gambling addiction, overeating, or overtraining. More research needs to be done into it. And I think this is a key thing where, say if you're an alcoholic, you do the Alcoholics Anonymous, and oftentimes it's kind of trading one addiction to another. You're trading your addiction to alcohol to something a little bit healthier by going to the group or turning it into exercise. These are players that are used to a routine, and through routine, they get validation, and they are in a very, let's face it, a very, very high paying area that they're going to have people continually validating them, and they're going to continue to enable them to gamble. And obviously people that are involved with gambling want them to continue gambling, and they're going to get validated from all aspects until it's too late. And there was a player, Frank Noble, who came through the Chelsea academy, kind of made his name at West Ham, who dropped through the ranks as players do. Not everybody can make it at the top. And where he actually was first properly exposed to gambling was in the much lower leagues, where players were talking about it openly on the bus. He learned what a 2-1 bet was on a way to a match.
On football stuff we talking, or just in general,
Yeah.
just betting football?
Both.
Okay.
And this is players gambling 100 or 200 pounds a time, when 100 or 200 pounds is actually a significant portion,
It's like
of your
20% of their
weekly
wages or whatever, more possibly.
Yeah, and I think that's where this kind of stuff becomes a lot more dangerous, is when you don't have the fallback of a kitty. Like we've seen it with the likes of Michael Chopra. I think he was $1 million in debt at one stage. Yes, absolutely tragic, but there's a lot of lads out there that would be on 20 or 30k a year, and they're spending 20 or 30k a year in gambling.
Yeah.
And they don't have the name to come back on. Michael Chopra can at least go and become a pundit.
I mean, we've all seen, we've all been in casinos after a night out, or on holiday, whatever, and you did without fail every time you see that guy or that girl who's fully on tilt, trying to claim it all back, and it's bloody grim. It's you just want to drag him out of there by his hair,
And what would you say? Like, do you think it comes from? Do you think a large portion of it comes from the sort of environments these players are raised in? Do you think it's something that goes back to their childhoods and they're growing up in that environment? So once they get the money and the fame and stuff, it becomes a lot more easier to slip into that. Or do you think it's something that happens further down the line?
I think it's a mix. Personally, I heard a thing today. I was listening to a podcast, with one of the actors from Line of Duty, and he was saying that he feels that famous people, basically the age you get famous at, you never grow older than that. So if you were 15 when everyone knew your name, you're going to be 15 in your head for the rest of your life. No matter how much you kind of grow up a little bit, you're still a bit of a kid. And I think it comes from, look, a lot of the time, not every time, professional footballers come from less educated circumstances because they focused on football, gone through youth teams where their feet are is what matter, not their brains. And then I think, as they go on, they get the money and, they get the chance to win even bigger money. And then as they're kind of winding down their career, not every player has that golden parachute, and they're trying to kind of bring more to the table for the long run. But yeah, I don't know about you, Killian, or back to you, Nate, on it, but I think it's a real mixed bag of stuff.
Just one thing, like, that's quite interesting what you said there. Like, when they're in the academy, like, they're judged more on their feet. But then thinking back now, is that like that if these clubs and leagues are going to take money from these betting companies, is that not where the structure needs to be put into? Is when these
100%.
kids come into training grounds and stuff at 8 years old, that's when they should be learning about betting, especially when they're going to be in environments that are so heavily surrounded by it.
100%.
I think that's the biggest issue, is that it seems to be so inextricably linked that, like, whether it's just us going down to a pub, like I think I've made all about 5 bets in my life. It's just I don't have that kind of streak in me, but I know a lot of lads that from 15, 14, 13 years of age, that's how they get into football, because they're either watching their parents do it or they're seeing like their mates do it, and it's just part of doing, that's part of the game, is putting a bet on. And I kind of get that. Like, imagine horse racing without betting. Like, that's half the culture gone. And for a lot of people, it's the same with football. Because where I think is underestimated with football is football isn't really on the terraces of the stadiums anymore. Football is in
Yeah,
the local pub, or it's at home, and that's where the gambling's happening. It's happening on phones. It's happening between mates. It can be innocent, but it can also not be.
That's, I think, a thing of maybe the age I am, where like I've never actually bet online ever. Like, I've never done the apps or whatever. But like, I remember back in the days, you'd be 15, 16 going to Shamrock Rovers games, and after a year or two, you're like, oh, we know kind of quite a bit about the League of Ireland. May as well make a bit of coin on it. And then me and my mate would just kind of, with our fiver or tenner every Friday before we hopped on the bus, just lob on an accumulator, a couple of League of Ireland teams, maybe a bit of Prem, maybe a bit of La Liga. But and it's that kind of thing, and it reminds me of an ad that I saw during, it was, what World Cup was it where Ronaldo got sent off? Was it 2000, or Euros? Was it 2000? I don't know, 4, 6? I don't know, somewhere in there.
2004. Yeah.
Yeah. So that there was a game that came on in the ad break with that, or so there was an ad that came on during the break, and it was, betting makes everything more fun. You'd never get away with that now. Not a bloody chance. You know what I mean? That was the attitude. And like, look, I think most Irish houses, maybe even UK included, is, you grow up with your folks going, do you want to put £2 on a horse in the Grand National?
yeah, that's what I
And
was thinking.
that's a very parochial Irish thing,
Yeah, it's
And I think that comes back to that 8-year-old needing to be educated then. And it's not saying any of our parents did anything bad. It's just the way that it is in the country we live in. But I think the where it also needs to be brought in terms of that education is, a lot of the time the betting comes from boredom and mental health, and there's a lot of other reasons. It's not just the kind of dopamine search. But I really think Nate's hit it on the nail on the head there with it. It needs to come in early.
But like, I think now is like, specifically, it's so accessible now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how many betting apps are there now? It's like, and are the betting companies doing enough to ensure that underage people aren't getting into these apps and being able to do it? It's like, there's a whole ecosystem that's so much bigger than just football, that, like, from the outside looking in, like, it doesn't look like it will ever be fixed, because it is such a big problem. And I think that's, like, obviously things have gotten better with regulation and all that, but there's still such a huge gap in regulation.
100%. Like, I won more before I was 18 than I've won since, and I'm 30.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing.
So earlier this month, Bet365 admitted that Stephen Cocker was dropped from work as a pundit on a series it had sponsored because of his public statements on gambling, which shows the level of impact that gambling can have on football media as a whole. Cocker believes that the move to ban betting companies' logos from the fronts of its club's shirts is the first small step towards helping players and fans, but also describes it as putting a plaster on a broken leg. 8 of the 20 current Premier League clubs have gambling firms as the main sponsor on the chest of their shirts.
Which is heavy. That's a lot,
including Ivan Toney's Brentford, who have Hollywood Bets as theirs. And the EFL, the 3 divisions of the 72 clubs below the Premier League, has a long-term partnership with Sky Bet. Like, the months before Ivan Toney was actually sentenced with his ban, he was awarded the Sky Bet Player of the Month.
Oh, Jesus. You can't even write that, like.
So, lads, can a balance be found?
I don't know in the current guise. Like, I remember Joey Barton saying before he had his own issues with gambling, and he was like, making me run around on a pitch with gambling logos all over me. It's like trying to ask an alcoholic to work in a pub. You know what I mean? Like it's you can't really, you know, if you're going to so heavily ban them, why are you almost holding the carrot in front of their face for, I don't know, 52 weeks of the year realistically, because it's probably on their training kit as well. So I don't know about you guys, but I think it needs to be a bit of an all or nothing situation here. And let's face it, they're never gonna not have betting partners in football. I just don't see it. Like the likes of Sky Bet are too well connected in the States. ESPN have launched a sports book, which they partner with Penn International, which used to be Barstool Sports' sports book, but it's just getting bigger and bigger. And like Nate said, it's more available than ever. So it's not going away. It's just about there will be collateral damage, and I don't think the betting companies care about it.
No, for sure, and that's the part that I personally struggle with is like, where's the line? Like, you can't have these players, quote unquote, shill gambling companies every week and then have them refrain from using it. It's like there has to be a middle ground, and I think the only way forward I see is proactive steps from leagues and clubs to search out these people and re-educate them. You don't need to hit them with the iron fist every time. Um, I think like the most recent bans, I think they've sort of been used as like this is the punishment you're gonna get. Where I think all that needs to be like reevaluated now, and they really need to like set out guidelines, set out a bigger picture on, okay, this is the steps we're gonna do. These are the steps the gambling companies need to do, and work together.
But like, how on earth can they legitimize giving you a bigger ban for gambling than for racism? That's what I don't get. You know what I mean? Like, you look at, when the whole Everest Suarez thing or the Anton Ferdinand case or plenty, then like it's a couple of games, max a couple of months. You don't see like Tonali was up for, if Tonali didn't take the plea deal, it was 3 years. Like,
Yeah.
that's lunacy. Like, and especially with the Ivan Toney one, because he's not even been allowed to train with Brentford. He was first through the wall and got done fairly dirty. But like, no one takes into account his mental health during that situation. Yeah, he'll come back and he might train in Dubai and whatever, or wherever he'll go to train, and he'll come back and, yeah, you got your job back. Fair play, mate. Now don't do that again. No one thinks about what the hell that man's gone through during that time and how that's maybe affected his personal life. And let's face it could make his gambling issue even worse.
One of the things, though, about the link between football and gambling that I think we can take a little bit of heart from is, Nate, you'd know this as well as I would, it was how connected Formula One was to smoking brands, and how that became just not acceptable. We've seen it with alcohol, with football. Like, you don't see Carlsberg on the front of a Liverpool shirt anymore. These things do change. So whilst I don't think football and gambling need to be completely separate from one another, there needs to be a church and state kind of attitude taken to this, that football needs to protect its own interests and gambling needs to help football exist. And with the way that it's kind of happening at the minute, I don't necessarily see that happening. But the worry is, there's so many things that are gambling that aren't considered gambling, like cryptocurrency.
You took it out of my mouth. This is what I was going to say to you. I do wonder if tomorrow morning you woke up and gambling didn't exist. I think crypto takes that spot 100%, and it's the same thing.
So is stock trading.
Yeah.
So like, what is an investment versus like an investment is a long-term gamble.
Yeah.
So like, this is why I think we shouldn't look to eradicate, but if you want to smoke, go outside. I think gambling needs to have that kind of thing, that kind of an attitude, is that maybe there shouldn't be in-game gambling. Maybe that's an agreement that gambling firms make with the leagues. Like, there's lots of little things that can be done.
No, 100%. And I think you mentioned F1 there is quite interesting because Ferrari is a great case study on how cigarettes have actually affected F1. They were sponsored by Marlboro. Um, Huge amounts of money got poured into that team every year from it. The cigarette, along with gambling companies, their budget to market is so massive that they can just pour money in. And what we actually saw in F1 was when the cigarette sponsorships got banned, they made a side business to use vapes as their way in. So then that was their cryptocurrency. You know what I mean? That was their little
Well, you
way.
see it with
Give
alcohol
it.
in motorsport as well, because
Yeah,
alcohol's banned, and then all of a sudden Heineken 00 is allowed to be a partner with F1, and so I think there's always going to be whether it's the vaping ones. I'm not going to lie, pretty damn intelligent, and the 00 thing's quite clever too, but there'll always be a way around it. I don't know what the equivalent would be for betting. It seems a bit more clear cut, but yeah, I don't think it's as simple as it being stamped out, because you got to remember, like you said with the EFL, how much money are they getting from Sky Bet?
yeah,
Multi millions,
ridiculous.
you know.
Killian, do you remember Mission Winnow, who sponsored Ferrari? Do you remember that company?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They were owned by Marlboro, and they literally, as a point, they made up a company that did not exist. All it had was a website, and it was Marlboro using their advertising money to still put into Ferrari. Like, that's how much money these companies have. Is they just pour it in. Like, this company did not exist, but it gained so much traction and stuff that people went and linked it straight back to the cigarette company. You know what I mean? So
That's really
smart
smart.
ways to go around it. Like,
I
That
also,
sounds like Newcastle's next shirt sponsor.
yeah, well, you really caught me on the hop there. Yeah, no, that kind of thing in its own thing is a disgrace. I mean, there's it's about as obvious as our green third strip. There's no other way apart from it being a shell company. I really didn't know about that Mission Winnow. Was it Mission Winnow? Was the name of it?
yeah, as Mission Winnow. So basically, this company did not exist. It was just a website, and people went and were like, "Why is this random company who have no infrastructure in the entire world pumping millions into this team?" And then two and two happened, and literally the whole sport knew that it was that cigarette company. So their marketing campaign worked. Do you know what I mean?
I will say that the Marlboro kind of whatever kind of clothing they had at around that time, the Ferrari Marlboro gear was as cool as you would ever come across.
But that's where they get you. That's where they get people wearing these getting like like it is such a wicked and like crazy levels that they go to shell these companies. Like it's crazy. Like
I kind of have a bold idea, but maybe it could satisfy all parties because giving them the benefit of the doubt, I do believe gambling firms want to help the situation because if they don't, they get left behind in history. So maybe what needs to happen is a fit and proper persons test for gambling companies that unless they do X, Y, and Z, they can't be associated with the league. So that they give courses like that they have a certain amount of hours racked up for community support on educating academies and clubs that they show every year through independent adjudicators what they do to combat underage gambling, things like that we would expect to see happening with owners. Well, maybe we should enforce the same thing with sponsors because as we were saying with Mission Winnow, well then we should actually know where the money's coming from. And I think people need to be very clear on that. And I think it would do no harm to have that level of transparency to bring the trust back for the fans and for the players, because I think that's a worry for them going forward. Say the likes of Stephen Cocker, how is he meant to continue in a career if they're going to stop hiring him because of him telling his own story?
See, my only thing with that, I totally agree with you, right? I think that's a bare minimum of what they need to do to at least legitimize their presence. But the only thing that it brings to mind is it's like, the way the NFL and concussion, it's that ever growing topic. And, the NFL send in their doctors each year to the NFL players, outline the benefits of their new helmet, all this research, but they're still getting concussion at the end of it. Like it seems like a bit of a fugazi kind of situation. So I think it'd be like say Marlboro's still in F1 and they go into the driver and go, well, smoking's bad for you. You shouldn't smoke. But they've done their job, on them. If they want to smoke, they want to smoke. So it's kind of like, I think at a baseline, absolutely goes back to that education piece and that. But I wonder, is there a cap, I suppose, in terms of like, say, if the Premier League allows 3 teams to have betting partners, then you can almost bring into the case, say, if you're Brentford, you want to make some extra cash, you've got a betting sponsor, you want to sell your slot. It's like a designated player spot in the States. So I think if you can try cap the amount of sponsorship opportunities for the gambling companies, it could help.
But where does that end and ownership begin? Being a much harder thing to police, and I think that's why capping it, I think that you'd have a lot of teams whinging about it because it'd be favoritism.
Probably, yeah.
But the other thing about it is kind of going, well, then I'm just going to buy 20% for this year. I'll give you 10 million and we'll be a 10% partner for this year. And after that, I'll sell it back to you for nothing. Like,
fair.
There's enough dodgy dealings going on between companies based in the Middle East and owning clubs and those based in the other side of Europe to us, and ownership and stuff that I don't think we need to encourage the likes of that with gambling.
Dodgy Middle Eastern owners? I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of this.
You're quite knowledgeable in that.
I don't know. We've got some lovely businessmen in charge of Newcastle. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, Amanda Staveley and that, isn't it?
Well, gentlemen, on that, it brings us to a close. Thank you very much for sticking with us, you, the listener. It was a heavier subject than we normally do, but we hope you feel a little bit more educated and a little bit better informed. And whether you need help yourself or somebody you care about, Gambling Care can refer you to dedicated support services and resources that can help people overcome the impact of problem gambling and get their lives back on track. Head to gamblingcare.ie or call their number 1800 936 725 for more information. Gentlemen, thank you very much, and I'll chat to you next week.
It's been a
Chat
pleasure,
soon.
mate.
I'm not into podcasts.
I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again. What a hit!
The back of the net.